Okay, I'm very excited to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show Professor Michael Kosterlitz, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics last year. He's a professor at Brown University. Professor, before we dive in, could you just give us I know it's not brief, but a little explanation of what your Nobel Prize was for?
Along with David Fowler, solving a problem in statistical mechanics which had been around for 20, 30 years, and nobody had ever understood it.
Okay, so I'm sure you won't be able to make us able to understand it in a brief discussion, but a lot of what I understand what you did had to do with superconductivity. Could you explain what the connection is?
Well, it can be applied to various systems of which superconductivity is one. It was a problem in two dimensions. If you like, these can represent a physical system, very thin film, and it's a question of phase transitions in such systems. In superconductivity, the old rigorous mathematical theory, if you interpret the theory in a standard way, what it said was there could be no phase transition in two dimensions, and therefore superconductivity and superfluidity should not exist in two dimensions. Mm-hmm. But there are experiments around which clearly showed that superfluidity did exist in two dimensions. So there was this contradiction between the interpretation of a rigorous theorem and observation, and the two were completely in contradiction, and so this was a problem that had needed to be looked at. Thallos and I looked at it, and we realized that there was no contradiction. It's just that the interpretation of the rigorous mathematical theorem was wrong.
Mm-hmm. I see. So you actually applied mathematics called topology to this physics question in order to develop an answer?
Let's put it this way. You can couch it in the terminology of topology, but when we got into this, I personally would not have known a piece of topology if it had sat up and talked. However, Thallos, who was the genius of the team, he knew everything about everything, and he knew what topology was and so on. And he pointed out that the excitations we considered very important were actually, you could call them topological excitations.
Okay, so the work that you were doing actually had applications in many different areas of science. The one that I brought up before about superconductivity, and you referred to superfluidity, were terms that I've heard not just in the world of science, but actually because people are talking about how the science can ultimately be applied to practical life. Now, the work that you were doing, for which you won the Nobel Prize, how many years ago were you doing that work?
We did it in 1973-74.
Wow, so it took a long time for the Nobel Committee to realize how important this was.
Yes. I mean, there was some noise and a push for this work to be given the Nobel Prize in the mid-80s, but nothing came of it because it was in competition with things like laser cooling, which actually got the prize back then.
Uh-huh. All right, well, you were very patient to wait. We are talking with Professor Michael Kosterlitz at Brown University. He is one of the winners of the Nobel Prize in Physics last year. He's been talking to us about some of the science related to what he did. Now, Professor, I kind of want to turn the table a little more to understand more in terms of practical applications. You know, this is a personal finance show, and I know that you do not claim to be a personal finance expert, but I think you're a dreamer. I think that you have the ability to see things the way other people don't, and that is a trait that a lot of great investors have. They're able to look and imagine what will be in the future. So help me to imagine a little bit what some of the work that you've done could do to improve the world.
I've been asked this sort of question before, and really I don't have an answer. Let me tell you why. And that is because our motivation for looking at this problem for which we got the Nobel Prize was not from an application point of view, but we regarded it as an interesting, unsolved theoretical problem. That's why we did the work, because we wanted to solve this particular theoretical problem. The idea of applications never entered our minds when we did the work. To tell the truth, I was quite surprised, very surprised, when 40 years later I heard that the work had been awarded the Nobel Prize for physics, because I still didn't know what sort of applications in real life this work would have. I mean, it can be applied to thin superconducting films, can be applied to to explain some observations on clouds of cold atoms, and I suppose that it can be applied to various electronics in thin films. So maybe it will have some applications. There's like a lot of things, that much of the theoretical work that's done is just sits there and waits for an application. Because after all, in order to come up with some useful application of something, the understanding of the theory has to exist already.
Well, aren't we seeing some of this already with like the superfast trains, they call them the maglev trains, or
but that is the work on superconductivity that allows for these sorts of applications. That was basically due to Fritz London many, many years ago.
Right, but the area of superconductivity is something that has allowed for the development of that industry, which would lead to faster transportation to things like MRI, machines that, for medical care, nuclear magnetic resonance type of machines. Aren't these tools that are only able to be developed because of the type of research that's done in academia?
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to when I said that the theoretical basis has to exist before the applications can be made up. And the theoretical basis is generally done in academia.
Is there any way for people who are not academics to look at this type of research, not necessarily the research you did, but even including that, and say, I see the potential, and then actually they can begin to make decisions about where they want to invest because they can see this science ultimately being used in some form of industry to hopefully improve the world?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's possible. But in order to understand it, you have to understand the underlying physics and some of the mathematics.
And that's the trick.
Yeah. I mean, look, people like me, we're experts in the theory and the mathematics. At least I like to think I am. But I have zero expertise in finance. And I think that exactly the converse will hold for people in finance. They know about finance, but they know nothing about physics. And
so how can we get together?
That's a good question. It's really a matter of education. I take the point of view as, look, I'm a student. Right, consider, I'm a student. Now, students go to college. I'm going to courses. Now, the last thing I would go to would be these complicated science courses, because in general, science courses are hard work. And if there's no clear path to some well-paid job afterwards, why go in for such a difficult education? I mean, there's biology, biophysics, there's lots of jobs available. So people will do biology and biophysics. That's the science they go for. Same with medicine. I mean, after all, if you study medicine, which is another science, very much a science-based subject, at least there are decent jobs at the end of your education. But physics? What decent paying job is available for a well-trained physicist? Not much.
I guess if you're very good, you end up winning the Nobel Prize, which if you don't share it with too many people, has a little bit of a financial benefit too.
There is a financial benefit, but even a complete Nobel Prize is less than what a very well-paid person in finance will earn per year.
Right. And you still have to pay tax on it.
Yeah.
Professor, this has been very interesting. It's a little bit depressing, honestly, to speak to you, because I'm feeling that it's difficult, because the work you're doing clearly is very difficult, and I understand it's hard to explain to...
It's not that difficult. It's a matter of having the right background to understand it.
So it makes it difficult to explain, and, from someone coming...
It makes it essentially impossible to explain.
Uh-huh.
But, in general, I think it's true of any theoretical breakthrough that in order to really understand the breakthrough, one has to understand the underlying science.
I think the takeaway that I will take from this is when I tell my my children and my nieces and nephews to listen to the interview that I did with you today. I'm going to tell them that the takeaway is that when they go to school, it actually is important to study many different fields and not to lock yourself in one area if you want to be able to have a vision of the future that you can actually be a leader in and hope to build over time, because otherwise you're working in your channel and I'm working in my channel, and I see that these are like parallel lines that don't tend to meet too often.
Well, I guess that's the one way of looking at it. My advice to students is, look, do what you're good at, do what you like. Just study what you love doing and what excites you. Because anything that doesn't excite you is simply not worth doing. Mm-hmm. And if physics excites you and you're good at it, then go for it. Same thing, if finance is what excites you and you're good at it, go for it. Because after all, a young person, you can't guide them into a particular field because they might find it really boring. But even so, there will be a field that people will like. Because if you really like it, then you're prepared to put a lot of effort into it and you're motivated. But if you don't like it, it's almost impossible to get motivated.
Right, that is very true. All right, Professor, we are just about out of time. In the last few seconds, just tell me, what's the best way for people to follow you and follow your work?
Well, unfortunately, my work is really only published in some of the scientific journals like Physical Review and such journals. If you want to keep up with some of the latest developments in physics, you'll have to take a deep breath and read some of the science journals.
All right. Well, we will put a link to that. We will also put a link to your webpage at the university.
Actually, I don't have a webpage at the university.
Oh, no kidding. Well, I will ask my producer to find the web pages that have where you are on YouTube, because I saw you there. That was very interesting. And people can learn a little bit more. Listen, Professor Kosterlitz, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time. It's been really quite interesting.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Check out all of Doug's money ideas at goldsteinongelt.com. Doug specializes in helping people who live outside the United States handle their U.S. investment accounts. If you have a question that you would like answered on the air or off, contact Doug at his website or send him an email to doug@profile-financial.com.